Welcome back to It's Not a Sport. Welcome back to It's Not a Sport. This week we didn't have a whole lot going on, not a whole lot of news, relatively quiet week. So we're going to move on to esports first because I think that's the more exciting news of the week in terms of esports. As you know, the Overwatch World Cup is still on pause and it should be continuing relatively soon. In the Overwatch League, League of Legends League, the League of Legends World Cup is going on, and last night was the first game of the knockout stages. The teams that made it out of their groups were KT Rolster, Invictus Gaming, Royals Never Give Up, G2 Esports, Cloud9, Afrika Freaks, Fnatic, and Edward Gaming. And last night we had the first two games, which were KT versus Invictus Gaming, and Royals Never Give Up versus G2. Both of the favorites to win the tournament overall, and there was only going to be one because if they both won against their opponents, they would go to the semifinals. Surprisingly, they both lost. Invictus Gaming took 3 wins off of KT, and they brought it to Game 5. It's best of 5. So Invictus Gaming moved on to semifinals, and G2 did the same off of Royals Never Give Up. So Royals Never Give Up was also knocked out, and G2 moved on. So tonight are the next set of games, and if you can, I recommend you watch them because this is by far the best Worlds that we've had in a very long time, where all the teams are pretty much equal in skills, and that is the first Worlds since I think 2014 where we won't get a Korean versus Korean team. So the games for tonight will be Cloud9 versus Afrika Freaks. Cloud9, if you're a North American fan, our only hope, and has been our only hope for years. And the hype is that we'll get a Cloud9 versus Fnatic game, and then the game after Cloud9 versus Afrika Freaks will be Fnatic versus Edward Gaming. So then in the finals, we'll either see G2 or Invictus move on, or we'll either see one of the 4, which is Cloud9, Afrika, Fnatic, and Edward. So it's a very, I think, exciting Worlds. If Cloud9 ends up winning, that would be fantastic. That would be incredible, because that would be our first Worlds. If North America wins, that would be the first Worlds that we end up winning ever in the history of our region, and especially in how bad our region is right now, it would be an incredible upset. If Fnatic wins, that would be their second Worlds title, since technically they won the first one, but Worlds wasn't really Worlds back then, like it wasn't the same, but it would be their second one. Or we have the Chinese win, or Afrika gets a skin. We're going to talk about 2 very kind of important topics that I think kind of go under the radar, which is health and communication. I think they're very big parts of esports and just in general, in sports in general, and especially in esports side, they're probably the toughest to tackle in terms of also releases. For this month, Socal was released yesterday, on the 19th, as well as Warriors Orchard World War III, which is early access for the PC. Coming up, we'll get Just Dance 2019, the new Spider-Man DLC, and probably the highlight of this month will be Red Dead Redemption 2, which will come out Friday when I'm recording the next show. Anyway, let us move on. Alright, so before we get into talking about health and communication, there's some really small kind of rumored news going around. The first being that Sony has started to kind of hire people for the development of the PlayStation 5. We've mentioned this for the past couple weeks. It's definitely probably somewhat true. I would not be surprised if they're developing a PlayStation 5. It's probably about, again, time. PS4 is pretty old. I just hope that it's hard to do, I think, because of how business works and how money works. But a lot of old PS2 games and old PS3 games are now ported to the PS4, and then it's ported to the PS5. I just think that now we should really be in a time of how PC kind of works is that if you own the game, you own the game, and the console, you buy the console for the hardware, and you should still be able to play previous console games on that console. For instance, I'm wanting to play maybe one of the old, Zelda games, but I can't because, it's not for the Switch or something like that. So, I hope that Sony actually kind of gives into that and they just continue kind of supporting PS4 games at least, or at least they can run on, the PS5. The other news is that Red Dead Redemption 2 comes out, I believe, next Friday, and there's somewhat this kind of rumored news that the people who are developing it are putting in 100 hours a week, which is ridiculous. But the reason why I mention this and why I personally would believe it to be true is because of just how Rockstar is as a company. They just seem like definitely a company to do this, just because of how, over the years they promised Grand Theft Auto 5 story DLC, and then they canceled that, and we never got it, and people, they're making bank off of GTA 5 and the microtransactions, and they have been for years off of GTA Online and the microtransactions. There's some statistic now that it's easier to actually, spend real money to buy, the cars and stuff you want in the game than actually kind of work for it in the game. Something like that. So just kind of how, they have become microtransaction, Grand Theft Auto Online only sort of company, and not really in it for making games, kind of like how EA is and how Ubisoft was, I would say. I would make me believe this rumor. Speaking of EA, apparently I saw this thing on Reddit maybe a week ago or so, is that people are getting banned off of NBA 2K or something like that, off of the auction house for auction house sniping, but they weren't doing that. It was just people are just randomly getting banned for something with the auction house, and it was a permaban too. So that was pretty awful and devastating. I would never want to do that. But let's get into kind of the first segment, which I want to talk about communication. Communication is critical in anything that you do in life, whether you're working a job, whether it's with family members, whether you're just playing online, anything. It's used in day-to-day life. It's a necessity to communicate, and communication is difficult, especially when it comes to sports and esports, because eventually you can't totally rely on communication. You have to rely on someone knowing your teammates. For instance, when I play with my friends, they have certain habits that I just know they will do. not off the bat, but I know that they'll, that they'll do that, and they'll know that I'll do X. So if they do Y, I'll do X. If they do X, I'll do Z. They know that. And that just comes from playing with, these guys all the time. They know the habits and mistakes that I make, and I know mistakes that they make. That's just part of the deal. But the other part is that we can't get through a lot of things without communication. With League of Legends, for instance, often when my jungler comes, which is Tito, Alberto, he's been on the show before, when he ganks my lane, I often try to start a fight before he ganks my lane. And he knows, and when he tells me to do it, he knows that I'll start that fight so that he'll come up exactly the time where I need him to pick up the kill. And it's just something that we communicated, so we know that he communicates to me that to go in, and I go in, and he knows, based off of my habits and based off things that I do, that I'm going to start a fight with this dude, and he's going to come in at exactly this time to help me or finish him off. It's the same with Overwatch and CSGO. Overwatch requires a lot of communication, I would say, but it also doesn't. You can get through Overwatch, I have, without communicating a lot, just because I know how a lot of the players in my elo kind of play. And it's probably better to communicate overall in Overwatch, but in the Overwatch, how it's become is that it's kind of like every man for themselves, and it's more of how much you can every man for themselves together. It's hard to explain to win the game. CSGO, on the other hand, is not like that at all. CSGO is exactly every man for themselves, and because it's every man for themselves, you need to communicate. So I think, now that I think about it, it's like this. Overwatch is a very heavy team-based game. No single person can carry an Overwatch game. Because of that, people know how to work as a team, to the point where you don't really need to communicate as much. But on the other hand of CSGO is not a super heavy team-based game. One person can completely dominate CSGO and can completely, single-handedly carry their team to a point where, you kind of do need to communicate because you need to know where they are. CSGO has that stealth aspect of it where you don't know where they are. With Overwatch, you do know where they are. League is a game that would definitely benefit from communication, just from jungle point of view, and just to be in the mindset. But if you've ever played League for as much as you have, you just kind of learn how things are supposed to be done. You know that maybe after you get this tower, you're supposed to rotate here, or maybe you kill this dude, you're supposed to push this wave, etc., etc. That's from a casual standpoint. From an esports standpoint, communication is key, and it's something that a lot of teams struggle with because you're not really playing. When you're playing casually, there's no clear leader. When you're playing competitively, there has to be a clear leader. And that's the problem with, I feel like, a lot of teams with communication, is that they don't know who that clear leader is. The reason why I kind of bring up communication, not only from the esports scene, but it's from an org scene. If you've if you've been following recent League of Legends, 100 Thieves was knocked out of group stage. And people were disappointed in them, severely disappointed in them in the League community, not for how they played, but because of their lack of communication. The League community and how Riot has developed us is that and same with the Overwatch community, same thing, is that they love to communicate to their community what they are doing. Overwatch community, with the Jeff Kaplan memes, often does those update videos for every patch. Maybe they do it once every 2 months, once a month or so, but they do it often. And they do those to, share their ideas with the community and let the community know what they're doing. League of Legends also has a lot of, communication things. They have Ask Riot, which they do blog posts every once in a while. And then they also are heavily on Reddit and the forums, where they just answer people's questions all the time. It's the same with Bungie. Surprisingly, each week they do a blog post, which is this week at Bungie, just talking about what are their plans and what are they doing with Destiny 2. So communication is heavy when it comes to communicating with your audience. That's some good communication. Bad communication, I would say, is 100 Thieves, and also how DICE handles their game with Star Wars Battlefront 2. Those guys were, I remember, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is not a good game. Not a super well game because of the communication and the lack of. I remember the community gets so mad because there's just, a lack of communication. And, take a drink there real fast. A lack of communication. And, the community doesn't know what they're doing, and then, the community asks for one thing, and then they get another, or something like that. Back to the 100 Thieves issue, people are mad that Cody Sun, which is the their star ADC player, which got them, 2 worlds, basically, didn't play a single game. He didn't get a chance to play a single game at Worlds. He didn't get a chance to redeem himself after that terrible fucking flash play that he did at last year's Worlds on Immortals, I believe. It was, I think, Immortals versus Fnatic. It was a horrendous play. If you watch the clip, it's kind of what he's known for, and he sadly did not get a chance to redeem himself from that terrible, insect. I have no idea what he was thinking. So he did not get a chance to redeem himself for that. So because he didn't get a chance to play. And what people were asking was why, what was going on. So people were speculating that, he had some controversy with the team, that the team didn't like him, or, who knows, they took him as a sub, but they didn't play him. Instead, I think his name's Ricard played, who has, he did his best in a very tough situation. He's a rookie, extremely rookie. He's on their academy team. He has no, experience. I think he played one NALCS game against TSM, and then he played all of the Worlds. So he has, it's hard to go from a domestic tournament going against a very tough, team in one of the best ADCs when they're in Europe and the best bot lanes when they're in Europe, and then goes to, Worlds where you're going against the best of the best, basically. So, and people are just kind of wondering, why was he playing instead of Cody Sun? And that's, bad communication from an organization. If you, again, I talk about League a lot, but if you're going to League, now we're seeing roster changes. I expect this, this is the point where they need to start communicating a lot more. When in terms of players, players also need to communicate not only when they're in the game, but when they're off the game. I think one of the biggest problems with esports players is their lack of communication to fans. I don't think a lot of players care. Well, they care about their fans, but they don't show their personalities. I think this is why I don't watch Overwatch League, so I want to do an Overwatch League reference, but I don't know a lot of their players. But this is why, like Double Lift, for instance, is my best example. Why he's such a, why fans like him so much is because he's so vocal. Because he's out there. Why people like Cutie Pie back in the day and still like him is because he's vocal. His personality was out there. And a lot of, esports players today aren't out there. But I believe that they're beginning to get out there. And the reason I mention this is because recently, Nike, everyone knows Nike, big company, is doing an ad campaign, I believe, with LeBron James, and one of the people they endorsed is RNG's Uzi, who sadly got Nike defeated today by G2, but he's a big name, especially in China, because that's his region. He's a big name internationally, I think. He's always been one of the top ADCs in the world, I believe. And, and Nike endorsed him. So that kind of forces him to go out there as, a personality. I think this is why Fortnite, if you're a sponsor of Fortnite, I think this is why it's so good. It's because Ninja, for instance, even though I'm not a fan of him, and then he had some Drake controversy, but he's smart. He's using his, he's smart in the sense that he communicates with his fans on multiple platforms. And what I mean by that is that he's sponsored by Red Bull. He's sponsored by, he's played with Drake. He's played with, rapper X. He's played with, singer Y. He's played with streamer, Z. He's played with different people, and he's, gotten his personality out there, which is why he's, so big, and I think why he's one of the biggest Fortnite streamers, not only because of his skill, but because of that, where we see other Fortnite streamers, for example, Myth, decline, because Myth did bad communication. I didn't know about this until I kind of started looking into it, because I don't follow Fortnite either. But the whole Myth V-card thing, which supposedly happened, was bad communication. We did not need to know that as his audience. That's his private. That's his private life. I wouldn't, disclose that information out of the blue unless, I don't know, someone asked me or something like that. But that's still, I would still think about it. That's, private information. And I think him disclosing that was bad communication. The fans were kind of and they didn't like that. Communication can get you into, good things, and it can get you into trouble. That's why when I like to do the show, I like to communicate, what's kind of happening with the show and what's happening with my life. So that's why, so I can get a schedule go, so that you guys, the viewers, can know kind of, what to expect from the show each week. Moving on to health, and this is going to be a kind of a shorter thing. There's two sides to health, I would say. There's physical health, and there's mental health. Mental health being the hardest of the two. When you're in an actual sport, physical health isn't a problem because you're always physical. Esports, however, physical health is harder because you have to be physical. You're sitting at a computer 12 hours a day scrimming. You're not getting any exercise. You need to stand up every once in a while. You need to eat good. A long time ago, I think it was the Odd One, got scurvy from eating nothing but Hot Pockets. That's not good. Video games, staring at a screen for hours, even if you work a desk job, your eyes can become bloodshot red. Not good. I've had cases where, my hand is just kind of cramped up because, I'm always holding a mouse. And, often nowadays I have to remind myself, hey, you know, look away from the screen. Look at your wall for a couple minutes. It may sound stupid, but, it's to help my eyes. Stand up. Keep walking. Stretch your hand every once in a while. I have to remember that. And those are the things with mental health. Luckily, I think a lot of esports is based in LA. And when I went to LA, I didn't see a single overweighted person my entire time when I was there. Here in Chicago, you get overweighted people all the time. But there in LA, no overweight person. And that's just because of the environment, really. They're by ocean, it's hot, people are always out. So that's why I think, from a health standard, LA's probably a better place for esports. From a global competitive esports standard, uh, probably Chicago's better. I think probably a better place to hold esports. Um, but I also think they hold in LA because it's closer to Asia and Korea, so it's less of a flight. So I think that's kind of the reason, but that's that type of health. The other side of health is indeed mental health. Mental health is hard because it's a mindset. I have this problem to day-to-day life is, staying positive, saying that I can win this game, saying that I can do this, saying that I can do X, Y, can't Y, doing whatever, and saying that that I can do it, and not giving up on myself, not becoming, depressed, or, have problems, or, comparing myself to others. It's mental health. I think, again, with the league reference, Doublelift realized that at, I think, Worlds 2016 when he took a break and he got, he walked into the Victor queue, he just got, he just knew he just needed a mental break from the competitive scene, so he took one. Ole, I was watching Beyond the Rift, and Ole was, saying that, he was having problems, so he took a mental break through drinking, and, that's how he solved his problems. There's also mental coaches, and this helps you, but this doesn't just apply to esports, again, this applies to everything. It applies to regular sports. If you're, I forget the football team, I believe it's the Cleveland Browns. I believe they're fucking awful. If you're the worst team in anything, it's extremely hard to keep going, I think, mentally, because it gets to a point where you're thinking, well, what's the point? I'm just gonna, lose, What's the point of trying? And you can't be in that mindset, which I think is why mental coaches, and just really talking to yourself, taking a shower and taking the time to, just recollect your thoughts help a lot. I think it helps not just with esports, not just with video games, just not with sports, but with life, with school, with work. This is why I think, meditation is huge. You can meditate in different ways, and it really helps you calm your mental state, calm, your sanity. You can meditate from just walking, listening to music, or, complete silent like the hippies do, whatever. And mentally, and I think that people try to escape from this. With Ole, for example, with his alcohol, trying to solve his mental problems was probably not the best way to do about it. And it's probably a short-term solution, and I think that's what he used it for, is a short-term solution. And he found the solution. He was trying to do it for a long time to find the solution. Probably not a good idea. But he did it. It helped him out. And I think there's other ways to do this. I just hope that, you find your way of doing it, and I hope that eventually I find my way of doing it. But that's kind of the gist of it. They're both extremely hard and extremely benefiting, both communication and mental health, and health generally. that's going to be it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We're coming in on the end of the year. Just a quick kind of update. I don't exactly know what's going on with the show. I think I'm gonna go maybe to the holiday break, or whenever my holiday break is, because that's when awards start happening. And 2018 in terms of games, I think we had some good games, but it was slower compared to 2017. 2017 had a lot better games, but this year was kind of slow. I think the best two I played would probably be, I think maybe the only two games I played that were released this year was God of War and Spider-Man. I haven't beaten Spider-Man yet, but definitely God of War was a very good game. So, that's kind of the gist of it. It's just because, we're slowing down since we're at the end of the year. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching It's Not a Sport. Check out the links in the description where you can find everything and all sources of It's Not a Sport. Also check out the stream where you can find some quality content. This is Salty Waffles signing off, and tune in next week for another great episode.